Today I'm going to be reading an extract from Robert Louis Stevenson's short story, The Bottle Imp, which he wrote while he was living in the South Pacific towards the end of his literary career. The story is about a Hawaiian sailor who comes across a magical bottle which will grant you riches or anything that you wish for, but if you are in possession of the bottle when you die, then your soul will be damned. And the only way that you can rid yourself of the bottle is to sell it for less money than you originally bought it for. You can't throw it away, you can't lose it. And the main character has sold the bottle on, but then meets a woman who he wants to marry, and having secured the marriage, he goes home and discovers that he has leprosy. So to cure himself of leprosy, he repurchases the bottle, but he buys it for only 2 cents, which means that he can't sell it to anyone without them being damned. So this the moment in the story that I'm going to be reading is a moment where he believes that he is doomed to hell, that his soul will go to hell when he dies. Now it was so with these two, that when they were together, Kiawe's heart was stilled. But so soon as he was alone, he fell into a brooding horror and heard the flames crackle and saw the red fire burn in the bottomless pit. The girl, indeed, had come to him wholly. Her heart leapt in her side at sight of him. Her hand clung to his, and she was so fashioned from the hair upon her head to the nails upon her toes that none could see her without joy. She was pleasant in her nature. She had the good words always. Full of song she was, and went to and fro in the bright house, the brightest thing in its 3 stories, carolling like the birds. And Kiawe beheld and heard her with delight, and then must shrink upon one side and weep and groan to think about the price that he had paid for her. And then he must dry his eyes and wash his face and go and sit with her on the broad balconies, joining in her songs, and with a sick spirit answering her smiles. There came a day when her feet began to be heavy and her songs more rare, and now it was not Kiawe only that would weep apart, but each would sunder from the other and sit in opposite balconies, with the whole width of the bright house betwixt. Kiawe was so sunk in his despair he scarce observed the change, and was only glad he had more hours to sit alone and brood upon his destiny, and was not so frequently condemned to pull a smiling face on a sick heart. But one day, coming softly through the house, he heard the sound of a child sobbing, and there was Kukua, rolling her face upon the balcony floor and weeping like the lost. "You do well to weep in this house, Kukua," he said, "and yet I would give the head off my body that you, at least, might have been happy." "Happy?" she cried. "Kiawe, when you lived alone in your bright house, you were the word of the island for a happy man. Laughter and song were in your mouth, and your face was as bright as the sunrise. Then you wedded poor Kukua, and the good God knows what is amiss in her, but from that day you have not smiled." "Oh," she cried, "what ails me? I thought I was pretty, and I knew I loved him. What ails me that I throw this cloud upon my husband?" "Poor Kukua," said Kiawe. He sat down upon her side and sought to take her hand, but that she plucked away. "Poor Kukua," he said again. "My poor child, my pretty, and I had thought all of this while to spare you. Well, you shall know all, then at least you will pity poor Kiawe. Then you will understand how much he loved you in the past, that he dared hell for your possession, how much he loves you still, the poor condemned one, that he can yet call upon a smile when he beholds you." With that, he told her all, even from the beginning. "You have done this for me," she cried. "Ah, well then, what do I care?" And she clasped and wept upon him. "Ah, child," said Kiawe, "and yet when I consider of the fire of hell, I care a good deal." "Never tell me," she said. "No man can be lost because he loved Kukua, and no other fault. I tell you, Kiawe, I shall save you with these hands or perish in your company." What? You loved me and gave your soul, and you think I will not die to save you in return? Ah, my dear, you might die 100 times. And what difference would that make, he cried, except to leave me lonely till the time comes of my damnation? You know nothing, she said. I was educated in a school in Honolulu. I'm no common girl, and I tell you I shall save my lover. What is this you say about a cent? But all the world is not American. In England they have a piece they call a farthing, which is about half a cent. Ah, sorrow, she cried, that makes it scarcely better, for the buyer must be lost, and we shall find none so brave as Kiawe. But then there is France. They have a small coin there, which they call a centime, and this go 5 to the cent or thereabout. We could do no better. Come, Kiawe, let us go to the French islands. Let us go to Tahiti, as fast as the ships can bear us. There we have 4 centimes, 3 centimes, 2 centimes, 1 centime, 4 possible sails to come and go, and 2 of us to push the bargain. Come, my Kiawe, kiss me and banish care. Kukua will defend you. Gift of God, he cried. I cannot think that God will punish me for desiring aught so good. Be it as you will then. Take me where you please. I put my life and my salvation in your hands.
Hello, I'm Laurie Fitzgerald, Vice President of the Literature Society, and I'm here today with Liam Connell to talk about his short story, The Bottle Imp. So, when did you first come into contact with the Bottle Imp, and what effects do you think it had on you both personally and professionally?
Right, well, I first read the story when I was an undergraduate, and I did my final year dissertation on Robert Louis Stevenson, and I tried to read all of his work. I was writing at that point about kind of moral messages in Stevenson's work, and I think the way I interpreted him then was as a kind of relativist. And I think, you know, Stevenson's quite familiar as a name to lots of us. We know Treasure Island, things like that.
I thought first.
And one of the things that you get in, say, Treasure Island is that the ship has a slightly different kind of is a slightly different moral space.
The sense of an island.
Well, yeah, that's right. So that when you are removed from a particular society, the morality around you seems to sort of change.
Becomes relative. Almost.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and because of poor health, he travelled around a lot, and he spent some time in Europe, but in the west coast of America, in San Francisco, and then moved to Samoa because the climate was he had consumption and died quite young. So he wrote a lot of his later work and arguably some of his most mature work in the South Seas. And I think The Bottle Imp is kind of funny in that respect because it's not very characteristic of the writing that he does there, and in some respects I think it's quite melodramatic. It has the character of a kind of fairy story, and it's adapted from a German folk tale.
An actual folk tale itself.
But what he was trying to do was write a story for a Polynesian audience, and it was translated into Hawaiian for him. And I think you can see in the English version that that he's trying to imitate some of the grammatical structures, some of the linguistic structures of the languages of the South Pacific, and that gives it a kind of a funny kind of character, which does speak to some of the more accomplished writing that he did in that period. So that was my introduction to it.
Yeah. How does it speak to you then?
Well, what's interesting, I mean, I find Stevenson really hard to leave alone. The first thing I did when I finished my PhD, which wasn't on Stevenson at all, was I gave a conference paper on his South Sea writing.
There.
And that was in 2000, and I have a journal article that grew out of that material that was published a few years after that. And my thinking about him kind of changed as I was exposed to theories like post-colonial theory, and thinking about racial difference, social differences that post-colonialism addresses, I came to think about that notion of relativism slightly differently. And now, nearly a decade later than that,
he's still there.
He's still there. And what really interests me, the reason I wanted to read that section is because it's actually about something really fundamental about economics.
No.
That notion of exchange, that notion that money itself is in a series of relationships to one another. But also the way in which that passage, he talks, Kokua talks about money in England, money in France, but actually this is money in the Pacific. These are American colonies. These are French colonies.
Yeah.
So that notion that kind of abstract financial system gets translated into the structures of colonialism, I also think is really interesting.
Yeah, no, I picked up on that in your reading when you were he was talking about Kokua, and he was naming all her values almost as a person.
Yeah.
And then that sort of instantly contrasted by the price he paid for her. And it's almost these abstract things which are valuable to us being like sort of funneled into this idea of price and worth. And
so absolutely. And I mean, you know, that passage is also, you know, you can see the way in which Kokua is treated as a child. She's described as a child more than once in that passage. So there's, you know, we could make a kind of gendered reading there and think about the relationship between men and women. But also, there's a real strand in Stevenson's writing and a lot of the writing about the Pacific at that time, which kind of infantilizes the Pacific Islanders. So that they're seen as kind of childlike and innocent. And lots of the fantasies about the South Pacific, lots of the fantasies about Polynesia as opposed to other island groupings, is that these are somehow utopian spaces and that the people are very kind of passive and are, you know, close to Eden.
Yeah, more so.
But kind of also they're not sophisticated and not knowing.
Okay. On that note, it's a bit strange note to move on from, but would you say you associate personally with any of the characters in the story, Kiawe or any of the other characters?
Not really.
Not personally?
No, I mean, I think, you know, one of the things about this story is it's kind of slightly simplistic.
Yeah, as you said, it's
structure.
very fable-like. It's almost, would you say then that there's a moral sort of message at the end to take from it?
Well, I think it's very curious. I mean, again, in the passage that I read, it's, you know, you should be damned only for loving me. Well, actually what the bottle has done is afforded him quite considerable wealth, which comes at the cost of a family member.
Very Faustian.
Absolutely, yeah. And of course, there's a. I mean, if we were going to take traditional sins quite literally, we could think about lust. We could think
Love
about
wouldn't really be up there, would it?
Avarice. Yeah, you know.
You've
so
got
there
7 deadly ones really to choose from.
And Stevenson was kind of interested in using literature to proselytize. A lot of the work in the Pacific at that time was about Christian mission work, and he was very, very critical of missionaries, but felt that literature could kind of instill a Christian ethos. So I think that moral sense is there. And you know, as a teenager when I went to university, I think I was quite interested in morality.
Yeah, I think we all
are. And a little bit pious about it, probably, in a secular way. And now I think that I'm much less interested in morality and more interested in the way in which morality as a code often goes hand in hand with some pretty despicable acts. One of which we could see as colonialism.
Is one based off of the other? Are they sort of interlinked, would you say? One affects the other, the act maybe affects the code, or the code is based off of the certain act trying to be achieved?
I'd be very loath to criticise people for hypocrisy. The only way that you avoid hypocrisy is not to profess to believe in anything at all.
Yes, which is very difficult.
Okay, so, but I do think that one of the profoundly human things is hypocrisy. And I don't really believe in, you know, the human too deeply.
Human essence.
But I do think that human culture is deeply, deeply hypocritical, and so, you know, that's kind of interesting, I suppose.
On that idea of humanity, I mean, it's 125 or so years since the story was published, but that idea of morality and maybe codes of behaviour, do you think that still, is there a relevance between that time and now, maybe. I know, especially in terms of the idea of economics and the idea of value and price. I know it's quite a contemporary topic for debate.
Well, I mean, I guess that's where what I would say is, I mean, I'm not sure how keen I would be to say, oh yes, it's relevant because we do this or we do that. But I think that the economics underlying it is absolutely here today. And if we think about the way in which people make money, it's about exchanging one currency for another and trading off those sort of minor differences in currency, you know, moving money literally overnight to rest it in a bank in one country so that it accrues a certain amount of interest and then shipping it back to another.
And we live in a very abstract time in terms of monetary value, especially relating to the idea of the use of coin. You must buy the bottle for coin, a physical note, whereas all our money today is numbers on a screen almost.
Absolutely,
So it's getting back to the abstract idea.
Yeah, so I guess that, I mean, I'd always want to put literary text into some sort of historical context, but I think that there are, those economic questions do translate across time, and we can see ways in which they might be relevant to today.
Maybe an essence of human in the end, after all.
Yeah, well, we're all coining some kind of value or meaning, I suppose.
All right, well, thank you. That was lovely. That was really good.
Thank you.